for everybody, can you give the distinction between by right versus a CUP?
Yeah, good. So if I've got something that's permitted, that's it, I'm done. From a zoning side, I'm good to go, right? Except for that stipulation thing I just mentioned, right? Which can prohibit the use indirectly, right? They could say, well, you could do that use. It just has to match this site plan. And you'd say, nobody can do this use in that site plan. It's not built for it. Okay, well, technically you're allowed to do the use. You just can't do it in that site plan. So you need to come through. So setting that aside for just a second, from just a sheer use perspective, if I get it by right here, for example, I'm looking at one down here saying, okay, I'm P and C1, right? Animal clinic. Let's line that over and go, okay, in C1, I can do an animal clinic. Okay, great. But then the question may come up, okay, well, I don't know if we would call our use a clinic. We do have some medical uses. It's a doggy daycare, but we also do take care of the animals if something's going wrong with them. And so, it's maybe somewhere in between. It's not a boarding facility, but it's also not a full clinic. So where do we fall? And that becomes then an interpretation where no jurisdiction can tell you every possible version of every possible use. No list could be that long. And so they put in categories, and then you have to go seek an interpretation to determine whether or not you're permitted. So let's say in this instance, I say, okay, it's not permitted. I either need to rezone or I need a CUP. So your question was, what about by right? What about CUPs? So CUP, different jurisdictions do it differently. But I can tell you in this jurisdiction, that's a council action. So I would need to process, it's not a rezoning case, but it's effectively a public hearing process, which looks and smells a lot like a rezoning case. The difference is I can say to the public, hey, we were already permitted. We already have C1. It's already expected to be commercial. It's just that when we go to this particular use, the drafters of the ordinance wanted us to come back and let the council take a second look. We may say, hey, generally speaking, we're probably going to be okay with certain uses in these districts, but we want to take a second look at it because it may be that, if we look up here at this chart, for example, this airport, man, in some I1s, it's a no-brainer. Who cares? In some I1s, it may be a terrible use next to neighbors, next to other uses. And so it's looking at the specifics of that use in that location so that we can say, I don't want to give blanket, anybody in I1 can have an airport because that comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes. Let's make them come back and look at that. In some jurisdictions, it's a hearing officer through a use permit, like in Phoenix. In some cases, it's going to be a council action.